Bite me!
K-Dogs Movie Review. Werewolves is directed by Stephen C. Miller and stars Frank Grillo. Two scientists try to stop a mutation that turns people into werewolves after being touched by a supermoon the year before. Wow, where do I begin with this one?
Bite me!
Do you remember the episode of Goosebumps, Werewolves of Fever Swamp?
What if you knew something was true, but you couldn't prove it? Something horrible you knew it could never be explained.
This is a lower quality version of that.
Bite me!
Werewolves 2024 is a beautiful, horrible, excitingly fun, laughable dog shit mess. A combination of the worst decisions in filmmaking and the limitations of low budget movies, while also being incredibly fun to laugh at.
Bite me!
By no means is this good.
Bite me!
Don't actually pay to see this. I am beyond surprised that this even made it into theaters. I wonder if this is a joke. Like, I wonder if this is some weird tax write-off or someone made a bet with someone else. Like, hey, let's see how well, this shitty movie can do compared to this shitty movie. I'll bet you $5 Werewolves does better than, whatever else is out right now. There were like 4 or 5 movies that I had never heard of coming out this week. As I said in the intro, the plot is pretty simple. A supermoon is coming, and if any of that light touches you, no matter who you are, you turn into a werewolf. And so everybody in the world during the supermoon event has to basically hide in their homes for the night. Basically, the Purge werewolf edition. I don't know where to begin. Everything about this movie is wrong. The acting in this movie it's not good. I'm sure the star Frank Grillo is good in other things. I feel like he always plays generic military guy. The intro scene for this movie, generic Call of Duty rock music playing while he's flexing his muscles and like hammering something. Everyone's acting. I mean, it's kind of funny. They're all really hamming it up. They throw in these terrible emotional scenes to give, stakes for this movie, but they feel so forced and crammed in. I also didn't buy any of the backstories of our characters. We have characters that have been in the military before or are doctors now that don't seem like doctors in any way, shape, or form. It's just used as a plot device. This review might feel pretty jumbled because I had a great time with this movie, but it's just so many things that are just horribly bad about it. So let me just go through them. I have a list. The editing for this movie. The editing is terrible. Scenes will just end. We have a scene where 2 of our stars are trying to escape this building. They round a corner and, oh no, there's a werewolf. They're sitting there face to face with it and they say, how do we get out of this situation? What are we going to do? And one of them just says, let's go. And then the scene immediately cuts to them in a car outside of the building driving away. The confrontation didn't happen. It's like we completely skipped a scene. That happens throughout this entire movie. Scenes will just end, and then we'll cut to somewhere completely different with the characters getting out of whatever situation they were in without really knowing what actually happened. As with most low-budget films, there are also just constant cuts, different camera angles when action scenes are happening, trying to make us feel like the scene is very dynamic. We're getting all these different angles. I mean, there's a scene where our characters are trying to crawl underneath a car and the camera is moving all in which different ways. And it's like, just show them crawling. Just show them crawling. It almost gave me a headache, but I'll get into what truly gave me a headache in a second. But the editing is just so frantic, in part because they don't want to show how bad the werewolves look. And this is where I actually have to give the film a little bit of credit. They actually use practical effects. Some of them aren't that good, and you can clearly tell that it's just humans in a werewolf suit. But nonetheless, I will always champion practical effects when they're used. I still think the Goosebumps show did it better, but they tried. And as I said, this is going to be a horribly inconsistent review, much like this movie. But the werewolves themselves are all over the place. At times, they can be incredibly intelligent werewolves that know how to break down security systems and electrical fences. But other times, they're just mindless creatures that bang on cars and scream and can't tell when humans are right behind them. Other times, they're using their noses very well to tell where humans are inside of a house. Terribly inconsistent to fit whatever scene is happening in the movie, which is, usually the sign of a bad movie. I will say a couple of the transformations were kind of cool. And speaking of things happening to get from one scene to another, this movie just tries to dial everything up to 100 when it didn't really need to be in certain cases. For example, we have our werewolves contained in a lab, and the government is studying them, trying to come up with this cure. One piece of metal falls over. There is a mistake. One piece of metal topples over. And that causes the entire building to basically blow up. Sparks are flying. All these alarm bells are ringing. People are running around. Things are falling into each other. Explosions are happening, and everyone's saying, "Containment breach, get out, everything." It's so funny. It's almost like that scene in SpongeBob where they forgot their name.
What's his name? What's his name? I got nothing on a name. Come on, baby, what's the name? What's his name?
Everything bad is happening just due to one thing toppling over, leading to the werewolves getting out of containment and running amok in the city. At times, it was funny to watch, but other times, I couldn't tell what the fuck was happening. Not only because of the weird quick cuts, which can give anyone a headache, but because the camera was not in focus half the time. My God, so many times throughout this movie, I thought maybe my theater projector was messing up or something. Characters are just completely out of focus. Sometimes they'll go into focus, a few seconds into a scene. It feels like whoever was making this movie didn't really have the time to watch what they were making and redo a shot or something. Scenes were just not constructed properly. The lighting was also just not consistent and kind of terrible at times, especially in the household scenes. They're just so incredibly dark, but not on purpose dark, which you can do well. They were just weirdly dim so that the cameras could not focus on the actors, and everything looked pretty washed out and terrible. And speaking of lighting, if you are a lens flare fan, whoo-wee, get ready for lens flares. There are an ungodly amount of lens flares throughout this movie. I don't know if this was on purpose or not. Maybe the director has a fetish for lens flares, but every scene has multiple lens flares. There's literally a scene where a character is walking down a hallway and walks through like 10 of them in a row. I was counting, and it doesn't stop. But the most annoying part of this movie, the thing that made me go from feelings of joy and laughter to actual hatred for this movie, was the strobe lights. If you have epilepsy or prone to seizures with flashing lights, don't see this movie. I'm actually serious. There should have been a warning at the beginning of this, because my fucking God, in the scene that I was talking about earlier where the whole lab blows up, they have an ungodly amount of lights just flickering on and off. It's literally like you're in a club. It's just boom, 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 over and over and over again. At first, I thought it was kind of funny, just the way the scene progresses, but the lights just don't stop, to a point where I had to literally just block my eyes and close them and only listen to what was going on. It was really bad, like horribly bad. Again, I don't know if this director has a fetish for club lights or something. I mean, I know part of it was to hide the werewolf practical effects and make them seem more, scary and realistic and pump up the action maybe, but it was like literally giving me a headache. I was praying that we'd finally get to a moment where we don't have lights flashing. It finally happens. Our characters get outside this lab that refuses to have consistent lighting. They get outside, they're in the city, and they're looking at where to go. And at one scene, they literally go, "Oh, let's go to this building over here. And it's literally a building where a light is flashing on and off. It's like the characters were just attracted to strobe lights. Characters also say lines really awkwardly to sort of drive or get through a scene fast. There's, a scene where a character is having the big emotional moment because her husband passed away and, she's on the floor almost blaming him for dying and not being able to protect her. It sounds like it should be a sad scene, but the way it progresses, it just feels so forced and rushed. Comes into the frame, she starts crying, she screams, and then she just gets up and moves on. And the sounds of our werewolves were all over the place. It's like they were 30 different animals. At times we had the generic howling sounds. At times we had dog sounds. At times we had tiger sounds. And even at times we had pig squeals, which very much reminded me of Goosebumps. Some of the werewolf fights and the gory stuff where they rip people apart are kind of cool or kind of comical. But again, the editing is so frantic. It's almost like that scene from Taken 3, I think, where he's climbing over a fence. It gives you a headache. Some of the special effects in this movie, while I like the practical stuff with the werewolves and some of the gore, muzzle flashes when characters are shooting guns look straight out of Adobe After Effects. Copy and pasted flash going over these guns every time they shoot. Also, ember effects when our characters are outside, showing that, it's post-apocalyptic and there's fire everywhere. The embers are just floating all over the camera. But there's no fire near our characters, so it doesn't make any sense. And you can tell that the embers look incredibly fake and they're not actually, in the same space with our characters. Some of the effects in this movie are just downright terrible. There are just story beats that don't make any sense, only serve to move the plot forward. At the beginning of the film, to show that we're prepping for the night, characters are prepping their houses for the night. But they had a whole year to prep their houses for this supermoon event, and you're telling me that they're doing all of these things at the very last minute? I mean, I know we're procrastinators, but come on. Also, if you're gonna have guns, why would you only pack 6 bullets for the entire night? Also, why would you choose to become a werewolf when you know that you're just going to try and attack your own family after? I'm convinced this movie has to be a comedy. So overall, I had a fun time with how bad this movie was and making fun of it. Those strobe lights, man, I'm not going to want to watch that again. And some of the action, while fun, it's not going to bring me back. So it was good for what it was on a Thursday night, but I'm not going to watch this again. It was terrible. Go watch it with someone else who appreciates bad movies. Please do not spend money on this. Wait 5 days before it's free on Tubi or something. Please let me know you guys saw this movie in the comments below. I don't think anyone's going to come out of this pissed off because who goes into this movie expecting something good? The question is whether you'll watch it again. Till next time.